Hey guys, tonight we slip into something ancient. You find yourself standing barefoot on the edge of a hill, where the air tastes like early spring green, damp, and mildly suspicious. Before you, the soft slopes of central Anatolia roll away into the morning mist, like someone forgot to iron the earth. Somewhere nearby, a goat coughs. Whether it's sick or just dramatic remains unclear. A dirt path snakes down toward a cluster of squat, earth-toned farmhouses. Smoke curls up from narrow chimneys, dancing slowly into the pale sky. You tug your cloak tighter. Okay, it's actually a woolly old blanket. But let's not ruin the moment and start trudging downhill. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is where you're listening. Let's see who else is wandering barefoot through Anatolian fog with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet find their way down the uneven path, crusted with frost in the shade but already softening in the sun. As you near the farmhouse cluster, the quiet becomes cozy, almost rhythmic. The distant creak of a gate, the muffled clink of metal on pottery, the occasional squawk of a hen who clearly has strong opinions. You pass a low stone wall, its top lined with broken roof tiles and a single line of sunning lizards. Beyond it, someone is scattering crushed herbs across a doorway not for flavor, but for luck, or maybe bugs. In Anatolia, you learn quickly that most things are for both. You duck beneath a crooked timber beam and step into the central courtyard of the farmhouse complex. The ground is swept dirt, padded flat by decades of feet. Around you, tools hung on nails, baskets stacked neatly, a wooden trough where a sleepy donkey blinks at you like you've interrupted his existential crisis. The smell hits you next, wood smoke laced with roasted barley and something greener, almost grassy, lentil leaves. Not the legumes you're used to, the ones that pretend to make soup exciting, but the leaves, steeped in hot water to make tea. It's warm, slightly bitter, earthy, and just weird enough that you'd pretend to like it even if you didn't. A door creaks open nearby. A woman steps out barefoot, long hair pinned with bone combs. Holding a wide-mouthed ceramic mug, she nods in your direction and drinks. You nod back. Apparently, you're family now. The sun climbs higher, and the mist thins until it's more of a suggestion than a fog. You wander from structure to structure, each one a variation on the same theme. Thick mud brick walls, thatched or tiled roofs, and doors that squeak in at least 3 different musical keys. The interiors are dark but inviting woven mats, hanging herbs, jars sealed with wax or hide, and the eternal presence of a hearth. You eventually find yourself drawn toward the largest hearth you've seen yet. Inside, a woman in a faded linen tunic pokes at a cauldron with a long wooden stick. Steam rises, filling the room with the scent of lentil leaves, onion skins, and maybe, is that fennel? You won't say anything. This seems like a place where people take seasoning very seriously. She glances at you, amused. Too early for meat, she says, in a language you miraculously understand, because sleep story logic says so. You smile, because you weren't going to ask for meat anyway. You point at the cauldron, lentil-leaf tea. She replies, tapping the stick against the rim. Good for dreams, bad for liars, comforting. You sit on a woven mat near the fire, and she pours some of the brew into a smaller clay cup. The handle has broken off, but the glaze still shines. You wrap your hands around the cup, feeling its warmth seep into your fingers. And here's where things get weirdly specific. In ancient Anatolia, roughly 3000 to 1000 BCE, give or take a few lost centuries, tea wasn't tea as we know it. There were no Chinese imports, no little bags with tags, and definitely no kombucha influencers. Instead, people steeped whatever plants they had on hand: barley, sage, fig leaves, and, in this farmhouse region, lentil leaves. Yes, the same plant they grew for food. Turns out, the leaves contain mild tannins and compounds thought to aid digestion, ease nerves, and, according to one suspiciously confident scribe, make babies less screamy. Historians still argue whether these early tea brews were purely medicinal or ceremonial, or just a matter of using every edible scrap before the goats got to it. The truth is likely a sleepy mix of all three. You sip, the flavor is mild, herbal, with a hint of bitterness that makes you think of wild dandelion. Not terrible, but not Starbucks. This is the kind of drink you have with your eyes half closed and your feet near a fire. Which, lucky you, you've already nailed. Outside, a rooster announces the arrival of something. No one responds. Roosters yell a lot in Anatolia. Nobody takes it personally. You sit in comfortable silence with the woman, who begins to hum while she stirs the pot. It's a tune older than the writing systems that came later. A rising and falling melody that loops like water down stone. You imagine mothers humming this same tune as they swaddled infants, or elderly farmers mumbling it while grinding herbs late at night. Across the room, a series of niches carved into the wall hold small objects. Stones, feathers, carved wooden tokens. One, shaped like a curled lentil pod, catches your eye. The woman notices. For luck, she says, always one pod in the fire room, to remind us not everything has to feed the belly. You nod, pretending you totally knew that. As the tea dwindles in your cup, the woman adds a pinch of something from a leather pouch. The steam instantly changes it. Now smells faintly of lemon and smoke. She winks. Alpha's blend. She says, don't ask what's in it. She never tells. You file that away under definitely ask later. Outside, the mist is gone, replaced by sunlight so soft it feels like warm flour. Children dart past the open door, laughing. Someone is calling a dog named Bone, and the dog is ignoring them with great theatrical skill. You lean back against the wall, cup warm in your hands. The scent of leaves and hearth, weaving a net around your senses. You're not just visiting now, you're in it. The rhythm of this ancient place is slow, circular, and deeply, irrationally soothing. Somewhere above you, the rafters creak gently. Whether from age or ghosts is best left unasked. You stay seated against the rough clay wall, long after your cup has emptied, watching as the tea maker ladles another round of steaming lentil brew into mismatched cups. Each vessel is different, some with etched zigzags, others with faded handprints, one shaped vaguely like a duck. That definitely wasn't supposed to be a duck. They rattle gently on a shallow tray as she carries them out to a gathering already forming beyond the kitchen door. Drawn by scent and curiosity, and let's be honest, not having anything better to do, you follow. The farmhouse's central courtyard has transformed. Low benches have been dragged into a circle, reed mats laid down, and a fire pit smolders with the remnants of early morning bread baking. The tea ceremony is clearly underway, but don't let the word ceremony fool you. There are no priestesses in robes or solemn chants. At least, not here. Just barefoot neighbors with white hands, cracked smiles, and sun-leathered faces settling in to do what they've done for generations. Sit, sip, and exist together. You find an empty mat and lower yourself onto it. Immediately, a small girl plops down beside you, hands you a lump of something that looks like a charcoal cookie, and says, "This one's not cursed." I made sure. Comforting. Again, she kicks her legs idly while the adults begin to drink. One woman pours from a large pot wrapped in wool to retain heat. The mugs are passed with little fuss, but every motion feels deliberate, even practiced. There's no rush, no phones, no meetings, just tea and time, and the sounds of people being slightly more awake than they'd prefer to be. Your own mug is filled again, this time with a darker brew. It tastes stronger now, deeper, almost smoky. Someone's added roasted barley to this batch, giving it that classic grandma's wooden cupboard finish. And here you see how the ancient kitchen, though humble, soot-streaked, and probably mouse-ridden, was a nerve center. Cooking wasn't separate from social life. It was social life. Every cracked windowsill, every fire-blackened pot hanging from those creaky ceiling hooks holds a story, a failed recipe, a harvest feast, a guest who never left because she just wanted to try one more sip. Mainstream historians will tell you that ancient Anatolian kitchens were utilitarian spaces optimized for survival, not ambiance. And sure, they weren't designing with Pinterest boards in mind, but these kitchens weren't just about boiling lentils and scaring off rats. They were heartbeats, beating quietly behind clay walls, radiating warmth and whispers. Take the pots, For instance, many were handmade right on the premises, shaped from local river clay mixed with straw and crushed shells. You can tell by the fingerprints still baked into their undersides. Some even have decorative ridges or tiny carving circles. Wheat stalks, a crude animal or two that might be a goat, or might be a cat with anger issues. Practical, yes, but also deeply personal. Each crack tells you who dropped it and who got blamed. You notice one of the elder women adjusting a bundle of leaves hung above the doorframe. Lentil stems, tied with flax twine and dried to a crisp, rustles softly with the movement. She pulls one down and crumbles it directly into a cup, muttering something that might be a blessing, or a recipe, or both. Then she turns to the group and begins telling a story. Her voice is low, melodic. You don't understand every word, but the tone says it all. Mischief, mystery, and maybe one or two livestock crimes. Everyone leans in. Even the chickens outside seem unusually quiet. One line catches your attention, and that's why we never stir counterclockwise with a figwood spoon on market day. No one questions this. Probably wise. Quirky kitchen taboos. Like that were more than old wives' tales. They were informal operating systems, rules wrapped in superstition. Yes, but rules nonetheless. Stir this way. Don't boil that after sunset. Never use the cracked bowl for guest tea. Each why lost in time. Each how still strictly obeyed. And while the mainstream archaeological record is maddeningly silent on tea habits, fringe researchers have begun noticing patterns. In dig sites across central Anatolia, traces of lentil-leaf residue appear again and again in domestic clayware. Not the food storage pots, the mugs, which means someone, repeatedly, steeped these leaves and drank them intentionally, maybe even ritually. One fringe theory. Lentil leaves contain mild alkaloids that might affect mood, nothing trippy, just the sort of compound that makes you sigh slower or blink a little longer. Combine that with firelight and the collective silence of people pretending they're not falling asleep upright. And voila, a proto-ceremony. As you sip again, the courtyard grows hazy in the late morning sun. A soft breeze ruffles the lentil-leaf bundles hung from the eaves. A man sneezes twice and immediately blames the dog. The little girl beside you has fallen asleep mid-chew, her cookie still balanced on her knee like a solemn offering to the snack gods. Someone starts to play a flute, badly, and that's saying something. Because even a good flute sounds like a duck in therapy, but the melody is soothing, in its own chaotic way wavering. Tentative, as if even the flute isn't sure it wants to be here yet. And suddenly it clicks. These ceremonies weren't just about the tea, they were about creating a moment where everything slows, where your body unknots itself in the presence of heat and leaves, and people who know which cup is yours because it always leaks a little. You glance around. Every detail, the sun-warmed clay under your legs, the flicker of firelight across stone, the scent of herbs both fresh and scorched, has become part of this moment. It's quiet, but not empty. Still, but not static. Just like the cracked windowsills you noticed earlier, which let in not just air and light, but the occasional bird, child, or rumor. This world doesn't keep itself separate. The kitchen bleeds into the courtyard. The tea bleeds into the stories. And you're part of the whole strange stew now. The elder woman finishes her tale. Someone laughs a bark of joy that startles the goats and sends a pigeon fleeing in protest. Another cup is passed your way. You drink, not because you're thirsty, but because it would feel rude not to. The flavor is different again. Someone's definitely added wild mint this time. Or possibly nettle. Either way, it tingles. You lean back, eyes half-lidded, and feel the warmth seep through your bones like smoke curling through that crooked chimney you passed earlier. There's no ceremony schedule, no timer, no agenda, just another mug, another sigh, and the soft creak of the hearth behind you. And honestly, that might be the smartest ritual ever invented. You wake to the sound of someone humming tunelessly, and the smell of something leafy and damp being roasted on a flat stone. The sun has climbed just enough to start casting long shadows, and the courtyard is beginning to empty out. People drift off to chores, mending fences, gathering herbs, threatening chickens into proper behavior. You're still holding the now empty mug in your lap, fingers curled around the smooth clay like it might refill itself if you're patient enough. Spoiler, it won't. The little girl is gone, and so is the mysterious cookie. probably for the best. You rise slowly and wander back inside the farmhouse kitchen, drawn again by the rhythmic sounds of preparation. This time, a younger woman is tending the hearth, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hair wrapped in what might have once been a tunic, now serving a higher purpose. She's humming, too, but with more conviction, clearly on better terms with her melody than the flute player earlier. The smell of lentil leaves again, but not just steeped. These ones are being charred gently, crisped on hot stones to bring out their oils. She glances at you. "You're not from here," she says plainly, not asking. You admit as much, mostly with your posture. She grins. "Then you probably think lentils are for soup." "Ah, here we go." She hands you a bundle of fresh lentil greens, still damp from morning dew. They look like something you'd throw in the compost by accident and then lie about later. Not exactly the stuff of ceremony. But she gestures toward the fire. "Not the pods, not the seeds. These." You kneel beside her, watching as she carefully folds the leaves into small bundles. "Tea doesn't come from the leaf," she explains. "It comes from the folding." Right. Ancient Anatolians didn't have the luxury of importing Camellia sinensis from halfway across the world. They made do with what grew stubbornly around them: wild herbs, hardy weeds, and yes, the humble lentil plant, grown primarily for its protein-rich seeds, but revered locally for its bitter, cleansing leaves. Fringe researchers speculate that lentil leaf tea became popular during periods of seed scarcity droughts, plagues of beetles. One infamous season when a very persistent goat named Mavi kept breaking into storage pits and gorging on the family stash. Drinking the leaves allowed people to still honor the plant, so to speak, even when the seeds were gone or too valuable to eat. You pick up a few leaves and mimic the folding motion. Pinch, tuck, flatten, repeat. It's oddly soothing, like origami for people who've never heard of paper and strongly distrust birds. The woman shows you how to place the folded bundles on the flat stone. The leaves sizzle faintly as they sear, releasing a pungent aroma, green, earthy, a little sharp, like thyme with an attitude. You'd call it nostalgic if you weren't so sure this is your first time ever smelling it. As the leaves roast, she drops a few into a shallow bowl of hot water. The water clouds immediately, turning pale yellow-green. You take a sip, stronger this time, more pronounced. There's a faint bite at the back of your tongue, not unpleasant like chewing on a leaf in protest, but discovering you kind of enjoy the rebellion. Good for stomach, she says, and bad spirits, especially those that hover near doorways. And uncles, you don't ask her to elaborate. Doorway spirits are bad enough. Doorway uncles sound worse. And now, the truly strange part. She reaches into a pouch at her waist and pulls out a small bundle of thread-wrapped stems. She unties it, revealing dried lentil leaves painted with what looks like ochre and charcoal symbols, spirals, cross hatches, a shape that resembles an angry fish. She holds it over the fire for a moment, lets it smoke, then places it in a niche above the hearth. "Offering," she says, "to the ones who still stir the pot when no one's looking." Mainstream historians, predictably, have little to say about this kind of folk spirituality. Most surviving texts from the region focus on grain stores, livestock counts, and complaints about the moon being too judgmental this month. But oral traditions passed down through generations tell a different story. The hearth wasn't just for warmth or cooking. It was a conduit, a portal, a place where the living and the slightly less living might share a quiet cup of something bitter and boiling. Lentil leaf tea, in this context, wasn't just food. It was language. Some say the leaves carry messages. The woman tells you, if you boil them too fast, they won't say it. If you burn them, they get angry. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were symbolic or sincere, whether people actually thought their ancestors sipped spiritual tea, or if it was all just poetic language for memory and legacy. Either way, when you're sitting next to someone who just scolded a handful of leaves for being too secretive, you don't press the issue. You help her fold a few more bundles, placing them on a woven tray to dry in the sun. Then, with a sudden grin, she lifts the tray, balances it on her head, and says, "Time to bribe the elders." You follow her through a narrow corridor, ducking beneath herbs hung to dry mint. marjoram, fennel, and several others that look suspiciously illegal. The back room opens to a dim alcove where three older women sit hunched over a low table, playing a game that seems to involve pebbles, curses, and occasionally slapping each other's hands. She sets the tray down with ceremony. The game stops. One woman sniffs the air. Another raises an eyebrow. "You used the north leaves." The third says, accusingly, "Only a little." Your guide replies, "South stems too." The tension breaks. They murmur approval, each plucking a bundle and placing it into a cup of hot water waiting nearby. One of them pats the space beside her, and you take a seat, feeling like you've just passed an exam you didn't study for. As the elders sip, the room fills with the warm, sharp scent of roasted lentil leaves and the subtle pop of air bubbles from old clay mugs. Leaves from the first harvest speak clearer. One mutters, but the late ones sing longer. You nod, as if this makes perfect sense. In a way, it does. The tea changes again. This batch is smoother, softer, less bitter, more whispery. If the last one tasted like protests, this one tastes like resignation and a good nap. You sit among them as the shadows shift on the walls, the fire burns low, and for a moment, everything. The cracked pots, the folded leaves, the painted bundles and doorway spirits settles into place like a jigsaw puzzle made of smoke. You sip, you breathe, and you finally understand. Lentil-leaf tea ceremonies weren't performances, they were conversations, with memory, with plants, with fire, with each other, and sometimes, even with the ones who still stir the pot when no one's looking. Later that afternoon, you find yourself back in the courtyard, blinking against the low sun and the mild delirium of too much herbal tea. The hearth is still glowing faintly, but most of the pots have been scraped clean and covered with cloth. Someone's drawn a crude sun on the dirt with a stick and then immediately trampled it, either accidentally or out of philosophical protest. A thin trail of smoke curls from a nearby doorway, and your curiosity gets the better of you. You duck inside a long, low room, a kind of shared living space where a group of villagers are gathered around yet another fire. Because in this culture, if something isn't brewing, is anyone even alive? This isn't a kitchen, though. The walls are lined with baskets, carved figurines, and long bundles of plant stalks hanging from wooden beams. The air is sweet and humid with steeping herbs, and the atmosphere feels heavier, slower, reverent. You realize quickly, this isn't just tea time, this is ceremony. And you've walked straight into it. No one stops you. In fact, a man scoots over on a sheepskin and pats the floor beside him. His hair is a storm of gray curls and dried leaves, and he smells like garlic and mystery. You sit. At the center of the circle is a wide clay basin, not boiling but steaming gently. The steam is tinted faintly green. Someone adds a bundle of lentil leaves, folded like before, and drops them into the basin with a careful flick of the wrist, like feeding a particularly picky spirit. Around the room, people close their eyes. No chants, no music, just the sound of soft breathing and steam hissing up in lazy spirals. You take it in slowly. This is a hearth not used for food but for connection. One woman begins to sway, not dramatically, but in small arcs, like a tree moving just enough to let the wind pass through. Her fingers trace circles in the air. Another man hums a single note low, steady, unchanging, as if he's holding a place in sound for someone not yet arrived. You lean back and let the moment wrap around you like the smoke, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light and the flicker of flame shadow on the walls. The lentil leaves give off their scent in slow waves, bitter at first, then fading to something you might call nostalgic. If you weren't fully aware you've never been here before in your life. Then right in the middle of it, a dog sneezes. You all look over. No one laughs. The dog looks personally offended and walks out. You're not sure if that was part of the ritual or if this dog just has opinions. Now here's a neat historical footnote. Archaeologists have uncovered hearths like this one in ancient Anatolian homes, carefully preserved under layers of ash and earth. What's fascinating is that they're often located in rooms separate from the main kitchen, suggesting a dual function, one for daily sustenance, one for spiritual or communal gathering. And in many of these sites, charred botanical remains of lentil leaves have been found clustered in these quiet hearths, along with bones of small birds, ceramic beads, and carved stones. Historians still argue whether this separation was about spiritual purity, acoustic performance, or just trying to keep the food from tasting like weird incense. Regardless, it paints a clear picture. Tea wasn't always something you slurped between chores. Sometimes, it was the centerpiece. Back in the room, someone gently strikes two stones together. The sound is sharp, but not loud. A kind of sonic punctuation. The woman across from you opens her eyes and nods. Then another lentil leaf bundle is passed around the circle. This one has been painted with something reddish clay, probably, or dried pomegranate, and tied with a strand of goat hair. It smells faintly sweet. Each person holds it briefly, murmurs something too quiet for you to hear, and passes it on. When it reaches you, it's warm. You hold it in your hands longer than you meant to. You don't have words to say, so you just exhale into it, the way you might into your cupped palms on a cold morning. Then you pass it along. Someone throws a final handful of herbs into the fire. The steam rises higher for a moment, dense and scented, and then gradually fades. People begin to stir. The ceremony ends not with a clap or song or declaration, but with someone scratching their leg and standing up. Just like that, the moment dissolves, and you think, that's how real magic probably works. No fireworks, just a room full of people agreeing to believe in silence for a little while. As you step back out into the courtyard, the golden hour has begun. Everything is honey-lit and long-shadowed, and the world feels quieter than it did before, like the ceremony pulled a blanket over it. You wander toward the edge of the hill, where a few people are gathered on a flat rock overlooking the valley. Someone has brought out a small clay flute again. Same flute, same chaotic performance. You're starting to suspect the flute is cursed, but this time, it doesn't matter. The music, if you can call it that, blends with the rustle of wind through dry lentil fields and the occasional bleat of a goat in the distance. One of the older women speaks, not to you specifically, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The leaves don't ask why we brew them. They just become the steam. That's either very wise or very tired. Possibly both. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some regions believe that steam from certain teas carried dreams, not metaphors, literal dreams. The idea was that as you breathed in the scented vapor, it would carry thoughts or visions passed down from ancestors, gods, or particularly chatty plants. The lentil leaf, though subtle in flavor, was considered especially good at capturing whispering spirits. You find that charming and mildly concerning. The sun dips lower. Someone hands you a warm cup, this batch infused with lemon balm, and, judging by the suspicious bubbles, maybe fermented plum. You sip. Sweet, a little tangy, a little like regret. Everyone begins talking again, but quietly. About the harvest. About a neighbor who apparently danced with a wild pig last week. About whether or not tomorrow's batch should include crushed almond bark, or if that was too ambitious. The chatter blends into the rustle of wind and the low hum of insects beginning their night shift. And you realize that what just happened inside the ceremony room, the silence, the steam, the shared breath, that wasn't some one-off special event. It's just life here. Fold the leaves, heat the stone, steep the thyme. Repeat. You wake again, not quite from sleep, but from that heavy-lidded drift you've come to know well in Anatolia. The kind of half-sleep where your limbs forget what clocks are, and the horizon feels like it's been held in someone's gentle hand. This time, you're sitting on a bench that wasn't there before. Someone must have brought it out while you were zoned out staring at a beetle. It's covered in sheep wool and vaguely sticky with something you hope is fig sap. You don't ask. You've learned not to. In front of you, a new tea gathering is underway, smaller and more informal. This isn't a ceremonial moment. It's a gossip circle. And like all good gossip circles, it runs on fuel. In this case, mugs of strong, almost syrupy lentil leaf tea steeped with dried apple and a healthy dose of sarcasm. 4 women and 2 older men sit on low stools around a squat fire, exchanging glances and smirks that say we've all seen things, and we're not afraid to exaggerate them. You barely get your cup when the stories start flying. Did you hear about Devoot's goat again? One woman whispers, "Oh, I heard it," replies another, louder, twice. In the same night, Poor creature hasn't bleated the same since you raise an eyebrow. No clarification is offered. Instead, a new tale unfurls about a suspiciously sudden rainstorm, a wandering peddler who may or may not be a tree spirit, and the unfortunate incident with someone's laundry being stolen by a magpie. And somehow, all of it is punctuated with sips of lentil tea like it's a sacred punctuation mark. This is community. See, for all their mystical steam rooms and ceremonial hearths, these tea circles were also the ancient Anatolian version of Twitter. Everything was passed around. News of who had a good harvest, whose brother ran off with a fishmonger's daughter, and whether the mountain wolves were looking particularly organized this season. You don't need writing to keep records. You just need strong brews and stronger opinions. You sip your tea and try to blend in, which is hard, because you just accidentally slurped and drew 5 disapproving glances and 1 pitying nod. Etiquette. Your learning is highly localized and vaguely threatening. One of the men leans towards you and points to your mug. Too much leaf, not enough stem. You blink. He waves a hand. That's why it bites the tongue. Needs balance. Like goats in a melon patch. That simile helps not at all. Here's a mainstream fact for context. Lentil leaves contain astringent properties, tannins and plant alkaloids that can vary depending on when the leaf was harvested. Early spring leaves were milder, more suited for casual sipping. Late summer ones, especially from older plants, were stronger, almost medicinal. This gave rise to what's now considered a sort of tea taxonomy in old Anatolian culture. You didn't just make lentil tea, you made a specific blend, depending on the mood, the guest, the event, or arbas. Apparently, your mood toward the goat that week. Fringe scholars have even theorized that early dating rituals involved tea compatibility. If your preferred leaf ratio clashed with your suitor's, well, best not to start a household doomed to steep unevenly. The man refills your mug himself, carefully selecting a thinner blend from a side pot resting off the main coals. You taste it smoother, a bit grassy, less like protest, more like passive-aggressive encouragement. As the conversation unfolds, so do the layers of social currency. Tea is offered as apology, declined as insult. Refused refills are tantamount to political stances. Someone mentions Olfa, the sneezing elder from earlier, and everyone groans in unison. She added fish mint again. Someone mutters, "It was a wedding." Another adds, "Scandalized." Apparently, Olfa has a habit of slipping pungent herbs into communal brews and watching people try to pretend it's not terrible. You're making a mental note never to accept anything from a woman named Olfa without checking for floating scales. The gossip keeps flowing. You learn about a cursed ladle, a romance between rival barley farmers, and the haunting of the southern chicken coop, which, to be fair, might just be a very moody hen. There's a pause when one of the older women looks directly at you and says, "Do you snore with your mouth open?" You confirm you don't know. She squints. That's fine. Just don't sip counterclockwise. And once again, no one explains. Historians still argue whether these taboos surrounding tea, how it's stirred, what time it's drunk, who serves it were formal customs or fluid traditions passed along like family recipes, the kind that live and die in whispers, adjusted to fit whatever moral lesson is needed for that week. But one thing's clear, these tea moments were where the pulse of the village could be read, like a daily oracle made of leaf fragments, gut feelings, and the ability to detect shade in someone's pore. You take another sip. The fire crackles. A pot rattles gently as it cools. Somewhere behind you, a dog barks at a bird and loses. The conversation turns quieter now, less giddy, more reflective. One woman speaks of her sister, lost in a storm last spring. Another talks about her grandson's first words, hot leaf. Everyone nods solemnly, clearly impressed by his priorities. The man beside you produces a small cloth pouch, unties it, and hands you a folded leaf. It's dried and paper thin, pressed flat like a bookmark. He nods for you to hold it to your chest. It's for keeping stories, he says. If it crumbles too fast, you've told them wrong. You hold the leaf against your heart. It doesn't crumble. Yet, there's something strangely comforting about that. The idea that stories live in leaves, folded and steeped until they flavor a moment, then disappear. No scrolls, no ink, Just a bitter sip and the warmth that follows. The sun begins to fade, shadows grow long again. The gossip circle disbands as slowly and naturally as it formed. One by one, the villagers rise, stretch, and drift off toward other hearths, other tasks, other evenings. You're left with your cup and a smile you didn't realize had settled on your face. The wind picks up slightly, rustling the lentil fields just beyond the courtyard. You sip one last time, now lukewarm but still somehow potent, and you think, there are worse ways to learn the history of a people than through gossip, tea, and the very strong possibility of goat-related crime. The next morning, you are up before the sun. Not because you set an alarm, they haven't invented those yet, but because an elderly man with a bell and no concept of volume strolled through the courtyard shouting, "If you're not brewing, you're stewing." You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds accusatory. So you shuffle out of your sleeping spot somewhere between a wool mat and a pile of suspiciously comfortable baskets, and follow the slow drift of villagers toward the eastern end of the farmhouse. There, under a vine-wrapped arbor, a preparation table has been set up. No fire, no tea, not yet. Just bundles, dozens of them. Twisted cords of flax hold tight rolls of dried herbs, flower petals, seeds, and, yes, the ever-present lentil leaves. Some bundles are small and tight, shaped like tiny scrolls. Others are loose, fraying at the ends like forgotten bookmarks. The air smells like dust, mint clockwise, and grandmother's secrets. Today's ceremony is not for sipping. It's for sending. You ease down next to a woman carefully choosing from a pile of leaves. "For I coot," she says quietly, almost to herself. He hated bitter things, but he'd drink it anyway if it kept the rain away. She wraps 3 leaves with a pinch of fennel seed and crushed purple blossoms, then tucks the bundle into a split piece of birch bark, ties it closed, hands it off to a boy with a long stick and a candle stub. He disappears into the next room where the fire's already being kindled. You glance around. More villagers arrive, some cradling bundles, others just watching. Each has the look of someone visiting a place half in memory and half in ritual, because this isn't just a tea-making session. This is part funeral, part baby shower, part full moon insurance policy. You watch as a man kneels beside the hearth and places his bundle into the fire. The flames don't crackle or roar. They sigh. The smoke curls upward, greener than you expect, and disappears through a hole in the ceiling with barely a whisper. This is how they send messages to the dead, or, depending on whom you ask, to the unborn, or, if you're Ulfa, to her cousin who still owes her a donkey. Here's your mainstream fact for today. In many ancient Anatolian burial sites, archaeologists have found burned plant remains deliberately placed in fire pits or offering bowls, often beside human remains or within ceremonial chambers. Lentil leaves frequently show up in these deposits, along with barley husks, sage, and occasionally the petals of now extinct wildflowers. Historians still argue whether these burned offerings were simply scent rituals meant to cleanse the air, or whether they held deeper meanings. Were they messages to ancestors, spiritual bridge tokens, or just early aromatherapy with dramatic flair? Back at the hearth, another woman prepares a bundle. You catch her whispering to it. "Tell them we miss the songs." Then she tucks in a coin, not currency, just a carved wooden disc with a sun mark, and adds 2 lentil leaves, one fresh, one dried. Balance. You assume you're handed a small bowl and offered a chance to make your own bundle. It feels like an invitation and a test. You reach for a few lentil leaves, one light green, one nearly black from drying, and pause. The pile of extra ingredients is wide. Dried pomegranate skin, thyme flowers, bits of feather, flecks of clay from a river long gone dry. You settle on a folded leaf, a piece of smooth bark, and a pinch of barley grain. Something about it feels right. You wrap them gently in a strip of linen and tie it with a strand of goat hair because that's the only string available. And also it seems fittingly itchy. When you approach the fire, a man nods solemnly and shifts the coals to make room. You kneel. Place your bundle gently into the flame and watch. It doesn't flare. It smolders. The smoke that rises is thin and strangely sweet, like the way old paper smells when it's first touched by heat. You stare until it's gone. Not even ash remains, just a bit of warmth on the stone. Someone behind you clears their throat. Not bad for a first time. You turn. It's the man from the gossip circle. He's chewing something that might be a reed or his own mustache hair. Your bundle didn't fight, he says. Means it was ready. You nod like you understand. He sits beside you. We do this for big things. New child. Good harvest. Missing ox. Sometimes, just because we're feeling too loud inside, there's something deeply comforting about that the act of folding and burning a leaf could be enough to quiet the soul. No drama, no confession, just plant, fire, breath. Another fringe belief surfaces in your mind, one whispered through obscure ethnobotanical studies. Some Anatolian elders claim that the steam from lentil-leaf fires could reveal truths to those willing to sit quietly long enough, not visions, not prophecies, just clarity. And in a culture that prized oral tradition over writing, clarity was its own kind of immortality. You stay by the fire as more bundles are burned. A young girl burns one for her lost cat. A teenager burns one for his upcoming betrothal and tosses in a hint of mint for courage. A grandmother burns one and mutters, "Try me again. I dare you." Though whether it's meant for spirits or neighbors is unclear, the hearth glows, the smoke climbs, and the stories keep steaming upward, disappearing into the ceiling like quiet prayers with bark and leaf and breath for postage. Later, as the ritual closes, someone brings tea, naturally, but this batch is pale and clear, just lentil leaves, steeped in silence. No extra herbs or fanfare. It tastes like wet stone and wind. You sip slowly, letting the heat trail down your throat like a whispered goodbye. No words are spoken as the crowd thins. People nod to each other, exchange glances full of meanings they don't need to explain. You recognize the feeling. It's the weight of a moment shared, folded, burned, and gone. You hold your mug tighter, and in the fading glow of the hearth, you feel something shift, not loudly, but completely. The leaves don't last, but their warmth lingers. It's late afternoon now, the sun a slow yolk dripping across the sky, and you're back outside where the smell of lentil leaves mingles with something suspiciously fermented. You follow your nose down a narrow footpath between two storage sheds, one of which is definitely home to a very bold weasel, until you reach a small clearing behind the farmhouse. And there it is, a low wooden table, surrounded by clay cups, cracked stools, and three very tipsy elders doing a terrible job pretending this is a solemn gathering. Welcome to the less ceremonial side of lentil leaf tea when it's paired with fig wine and a complete disregard for restraint. You take a cautious seat. The table is covered in stains, flower petals, and what looks like yesterday's cheese. A woman with a braid down to her knees slides a cup your way. You catch a whiff and immediately understand this is not just tea. This is tea with ambition. You sip. It's earthy, sweet, and absolutely up to no good. Careful, the man across from you says, slurring only slightly. This one kicks harder than my second wife. You try not to react because she's sitting right next to him, grinning like she knows exactly how hard she kicks. So what is this version of the tea? It's a blend of roasted lentil leaves, dried figs, barley mash, and the faint taste of something floral, probably elderflower, possibly regret. It's been left to ferment in a sealed clay jug for, well, long enough that no one here remembers putting it there. And it's got bite. You sip again. Your teeth buzz. This is what some villagers call twilight tea. Not because of the time it's drunk, but because of what happens after. You start in the late afternoon with a sensible mug. Then you're dancing with chickens. Then you're making loud declarations about moon rites. Then, if you're lucky, you wake up in a hay pile with a story and half a sandal. Fringe scholars love this stuff. One obscure field journal from the 1980s even suggested that early Anatolian social tonics like this fig tea hybrid were used to lubricate community decisions. Want to vote on where to dig the next grain pit? Better pass the jug first. Want to settle a dispute about goat boundaries? Hope someone brought the fermented blend. Historians still argue whether these drinks were true alcoholic brews or just overly optimistic infusions that accidentally got funky. But here's a fact. Residues of fermented fig and barley mixtures have been found in ancient vessels throughout Anatolia, often mixed with herbs including lentil leaves. Coincidence? Possibly, but more likely, a prehistoric happy hour. You're halfway through your cup when a chicken struts into the circle. No one flinches. The chicken is clearly known, respected. even. Ah, that's priestess, the braid-haired woman explains. She chooses who gets the last cup. You laugh, because of course she does. Then priestess hops onto the table, pecks at one particular mug, and struts off with all the smugness of someone who's been right about everything for decades. The man who reaches for that cup groans. Last time she chose me, I ended up married to a melon farmer. There's laughter all around. One of the elders breaks into a song well, more of a chant. Really? It involves a lot of repetition, a mention of lentils turning into birds, and a haunting refrain about socks going missing during windstorms. Someone starts clapping, another joins in. Before long, you're tapping your foot in time with the chaos, grinning, lost in the strange synchronicity of the moment, and that's when Olfa shows up. She appears from behind a hay bale like a summoned spirit, holding a gourd-shaped jug and an unsettlingly wide smile. Without a word, she uncorks the jug, pours something into her palm, sniffs it, sneezes twice, then pours it into someone's tea. No one stops her. "This is the blend I told you about," whispers your braid-haired friend. "She made it during the eclipse, said it was for vision." She didn't say whose. You don't ask what's in it. You already suspect the answer is too much. As the cups go around again, the laughter rises. The sun dips lower, and you feel the landscape tilt slightly, not from the fig wine, necessarily, but from the weightlessness of belonging. You've only been here a short while, and yet you've folded leaves, burned messages, brewed tea, joined gossip. And now you're sipping moonshine under a fig tree next to a chicken named Priestess and a woman who can sneeze curses. This is what community looked like here. A blend of serious ritual and absurd delight, of tea so strong it could make a ghost cry, and laughter so loud it might wake the ancestors. And while mainstream histories are full of wars, dynasties, and ruined cities, they often miss this: the cups shared, the leaves passed hand to hand, the quiet hum of a song that no one remembers learning but everyone knows. Your mug is refilled again, this time with something clearer, crisper. Someone added pear bark. Someone always adds pear bark when they want to slow things down. And it works. The group settles. The song fades. The fire crackles. Someone snores gently. You lean back against the hay bale, warm from tea and stories and that strangely comforting sense that everyone here knows your flaws and welcomes you anyway. Above, the sky is beginning to bleed into stars, faint at first, then clearer, brighter. A few of the elders lift their mugs in a silent toast, not to the stars themselves, but to the space between them, the part that lets the light through. You sip. The flavor is softer now, less fig, more leaf, the kind that reminds you where you are and that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The next day, you wake up somewhere new though. Judging by the faint smell of singed goat hair and the alarming proximity of a donkey's nose, it's probably not where you were supposed to sleep. You brush off hay, cough a little fig wine fog out of your lungs, and stumble toward the sound of arguing. You don't even need context. The tone alone tells you something's gone wrong, and it probably involves lentil leaves. By the time you reach the central courtyard, a crowd has formed. Not a panic crowd, more of a mild scandal with snacks kind of gathering. People are muttering, arms crossed, heads shaking. You spot Olfa in the corner, suspiciously silent and chewing on something that looks illegal in 3 provinces. A woman near the center of the circle holds up an empty string, just a bit of twine, frayed at the end, and flapping in the morning breeze like a flag of despair. The bundles are gone. She says, for the 5th time. The crowd murmurs again, and this is where it begins. The great lentil-leaf shortage. Now, to an outsider, this might not sound like a crisis. It's not a war, or a famine, or even a plumbing emergency. But here, this is a catastrophe, on par with someone burning the last flatbread or using sacred barley to polish their shoes. Because without lentil-leaf bundles, there's no tea. And without tea, there's no ritual, no gossip. No calming the ghosts, no bribing chickens, no mid-afternoon opinions shouted over mugs. You can feel the tension creeping into the air like oversteeped bitterness. I told you it was beetles. One man insists, or the rain. Too much sun, too little moon, another mutters. Olfa clears her throat. I blame the twins. No one knows which twins. No one asks. They just nod grimly. So here's your historical fact. Although lentils were widely cultivated in ancient Anatolia, their availability Especially the leaves depended on weather, crop rotation, and how many goats decided to stage a midnight buffet. There are documented periods in farming records where lentil yields dropped, and while mainstream focus has always been on the seed, the edible part, some researchers now suspect that community life may have been equally disrupted by the absence of usable leaves. Fringe theory time. One early 20th century anthropologist translated a weather tablet from Hattusa that read simply, "The tea is bitter. The people are louder." This has been interpreted by some as a veiled reference to leaf scarcity and its social consequences, or just describe having a rough day. You wander among the gathering, listening. A teenager suggests using chickpea stems instead. A grandmother clutches her string like it might resurrect the missing bundle. A child holds up what appears to be a wad of lettuce and says, "This is also green." It is rejected without comment. In the following hours, a search party is formed not for the missing bundles. They're long gone, probably by goat or ghost, but for substitutes. You're invited to join. Possibly because they assume your unfamiliarity with local plants might produce unexpected results. Also, they saw you drink Olfa's Eclipse tea and figure you're immune to suffering. So off you go, basket in hand, with three villagers who argue constantly about which direction is northish. You wander the fields. You gather. You sniff things and regret it. You learn that not all leaves are tea leaves, and some are very much revenge leaves. Eventually, the group returns with a motley haul: crushed barley tips, fuzzy mint, onion skins. No one's sure why. Dried fig twigs, wild sage, and a mystery herb that might be thyme or might be haunted. The substitute tea is brewed cautiously. Everyone gathers again. A clay pot is set in the center of the courtyard, its steam rising like nervous tension in herbal form. Mugs are passed out, reluctantly. You sip. It's not bad, but it's not right. There's no bitterness, no echo of warmth on the back of the tongue, no faint sense that your ancestors are nodding approvingly somewhere in the rafters, just heat and herbs and disappointment steeped to perfection. The crowd is quiet. Then a woman stands and claps once. "We will adapt," she says dramatically. Someone sneezes. The donkey brays. And just like that, the moment breaks. Because here's the thing. In a world where everything depends on rhythm season to season, leaf to steam, word to silence sometimes, the pattern snaps, and you're left staring at a mug full of almost. Historians still argue whether this brief ceremonial pause, referenced in an obscure oral tale known as the Month of Empty Cups, was a literal event or a symbolic one. Some say it reflects a real agricultural failure. Others think it represents mourning, or transition, or simply that someone forgot to water the lentil patch. But in that moment, among the villagers, it's clear something has shifted. The tea is not itself, and neither are they. People drift away quietly. No arguments, no accusations, just an unspoken understanding that tomorrow things might be better, or at least bitter again. You remain seated, staring at the swirl of herbs left in your mug. They settle slowly, reluctantly, like they know they're not supposed to be here but are trying their best. Someone walks past and places a single lentil leaf on your knee, slightly wilted, frayed at the edges, but unmistakably itself. You look up. It's the old man from the ceremony fire. He shrugs. "Found it in my shoe." Of course he did. By the next morning, the mood has shifted. Not drastically. No one's weeping into their porridge or fashioning protest signs out of bark, but there's a quiet determination in the air. The kind that settles over people who've decided that if the world won't provide what they need, they'll just trade for it. And so begins the lentil leaf trade run. You're not entirely sure how you ended up volunteering, but here you are, sitting sideways on a donkey cart, holding onto a bundle of dried lentil leaves wrapped in waxed cloth and tied with a goat hair ribbon. Next to you, two women and a grumpy elder named Enver, who claims he's only coming because someone has to remind the valley how trade works. Enver is carrying a bundle of fig paste and a handwritten list of debts longer than the donkey itself. You set out at dawn. The path snakes down into the valley, past barley fields just beginning to green, fig trees heavy with morning dew, and a series of suspiciously alert squirrels that might be casing your cargo. The plan is simple. Visit a neighboring village, offer a gift of high-quality lentil leaf bundles, and return with more in exchange, not just more leaves. variety, different drying methods, different soil, different flavor notes. It's the Anatolian version of a coffee bean swap. You arrive before midday. The village is similar to your own stone houses, earth-smudged children. Chickens doing their best to look official, but their tea is different. It starts the moment someone hands you a cup. Same leaf base. Yes, but there's a smoky richness, an almost floral twist to the bitterness. You blink. River-grown, says the woman pouring it. We let the plants grow wild between floods. More spirit that way. You nod slowly. Take another sip. It's incredible. Trade negotiations begin in earnest, which in Anatolia means sitting under an awning, drinking at least 4 more cups, and debating whether or not Enver once overcharged someone for a lentil sieve in 723 BCE. He insists he didn't. The village elders agree to trade bundles, but only if you also give them one of Ulfa's infamous vision blends for their upcoming moon feast. You all glance at each other, silently weighing the risk of sharing that chaos with others. Eventually, someone shrugs and says, "Better them than us." And so the barter begins. Your cart is soon full of lentil-leaf bundles marked with symbols indicating their flavor profiles: sun-dried, fire-roasted, fermented, and one suspiciously labeled noise. You don't ask. Fringe researchers believe that Anatolian farm communities had informal trade networks like this, exchanging not only foodstuffs but herb blends, pottery, and even songs. Some pots discovered near Kayseri contain not just food residue, but soot patterns that suggest shared cooking practices like using the same vessel to steep and smoke multiple regional leaf types. Tea became more than just a drink. It was a passport. Historians still argue whether these leaf exchanges were structured markets or just impromptu visits fueled by wanderlust and herbal envy. But the sheer variety of botanical residues found across Anatolian sites, often far from where those plants naturally grew, suggests a robust trade culture hidden beneath the formal grain tallies and tax records. On your way back, you stop at a narrow ridge where the wind turns warm and dry. Enver insists this is the best spot to sip and test new brews. Something about altitude and flavor memory. You set down the cart, pull out a few bundles, and start a side-of-the-road tasting session. The river-grown leaves are floral and dark. The sun-dried ones are sharper, almost peppery. The fermented batch, somehow fizzy, definitely trouble. By the 3rd cup, you've forgotten about the shortage. By the 4th, Enver is telling a story about a lentil plant that once bloomed red and spoke prophecy. You're not sure if it's true, but it feels true after the 5th cup. Then just before you pack up, an old woman appears at the edge of the ridge, carrying nothing but a copper kettle and a glance that could sour milk. She doesn't speak, just kneels, opens a pouch, and pulls out a small bundle, deep green lentil leaves bound with blue-dyed wool. She gestures for you to heat water. You obey. When the brew is ready, she pours a single cup. The scent is different, again almost citrus, with a strange, sweet undercurrent, like rain on stone. She hands it to you. You sip, and everything slows, not dramatically. No visions, no sudden memories, just stillness. Like your thoughts have folded themselves neatly and taken a nap. You look at her, she smiles, points at your heart, and says, "That one doesn't travel. It's for remembering." She disappears down the ridge. Back at the farmstead that evening, your cart is greeted with mild celebration and extreme nosiness. Everyone wants to know what the other village is growing, what they're adding to their blends, and whether Enver caused any diplomatic incidents. Ulfa sniffs each bundle and snorts approvingly. The hearth is stoked, water is boiled, and soon, the entire courtyard is filled with the smell of new tea. Each sip a different valley, a different soil, a different sunrise. And in this moment, the shortage feels less like a crisis and more like a quiet push toward rediscovery, toward adaptation, toward the ancient Anatolian truth. When the leaves change, you follow them. Night falls slow and wide across the valley, dragging a velvet hush behind it. After the chaos of trade and tea and Enver's loud nap on the donkey cart, you're finally alone, or as alone as one can be in a farmhouse with walls thinner than most good secrets. You slip past the main hearth and follow a winding stone path toward the smokehouse. It's mostly used for preserving fish and goat meat. But tonight, It smells like something else entirely. You pause at the doorway. The smokehouse is dim inside, lit only by a glowing coal tray in the center, and the thin lines of moonlight slicing in through warped slats in the wood. The air is thick, warm, and filled with that now familiar scent of lentil leaves burnt, boiled, baked, and something in between. But this isn't cooking. This is something else. You step in quietly. A group of 5 villagers sit in a ring around the coals. No one looks up, but one woman tilts her chin in welcome. You find a space on a folded cloth near the edge and sit. In the center, a copper bowl of steeped lentil leaves, a thick rope of steam winding toward the ceiling and curling like a sleepy animal. No mugs, no talking, just bowls of hot water set beside each person, and small pouches of dried herbs waiting for the right moment. After a long silence, one of them speaks. He said it again. This morning, the river talked back. No one reacts. It's not sarcasm. It's not delusion. It's just Thursday. Another nods. So I added ash to the bundle for clarity. The third leans forward slightly. Did it work? A pause. No, but I slept better. You slowly realize what this is. Not gossip, not prayer, not tea tasting. This is listening. The kind of listening that doesn't demand answers. The kind of listening meant for the strange and the in-between. These people are using lentil leaf steam not to drink but to summon. And no, not demons or ghosts or inconvenient ancestors with opinions about your laundry, but something gentler. The unseen. The confused. The truths that don't want to show up in daylight. You watch as one woman takes a pinch of red flaked leaf from her pouch and drops it into her bowl. The steam shifts color. Just barely. Just for a second, she breathes it in slowly. Eyes closed. There's no explanation. No results. Just quiet. This is what the fringe researchers whisper about. The fringe of the fringe. The idea that Anatolian smokehouses weren't just for preserving meat, but for distilling stories. That lentil leaves, dried under the right moon, harvested from the right slope, and folded in the right direction, could release something. Historians still argue whether these smoke rituals were real traditions or the fevered dreams of anthropologists with too much access to fennel wine. But in burial sites across the region, we find odd evidence. Leaf bundles burned without firewood, ash that doesn't match the rest of the hearth, carvings of spirals and steam trails etched into stone smokehouse walls. You breathe in, the steam is heavier here. Not suffocating, but not idle either. Like it wants to know what you've brought with you and whether you're ready to let go of it. Someone near you starts whispering, not words. Exactly. More like the idea of words. The cadence is familiar, like a lullaby you've never heard but somehow already know. You don't speak. You don't sip. You just sit. And suddenly, as if conjured by the scent itself, a memory floats up. The first time you sat near the hearth here. The cracked mug, the folded leaf, the hum of something ancient moving through a modern body. You didn't think it meant anything then, but now it's everywhere. In the smoke, in your breath, in the hush of the others, you begin to understand. This is how they remember, not through writing, not through statues or scrolls or loud declarations, but through steam. You glance across the circle. One man has tears streaming silently down his cheeks. No one says a word. He simply lifts his bowl, bows slightly, and sets it beside the coals to finish its work. Then he stands and leaves. The woman next to you slides her pouch toward you. Inside, dried lentil leaves dyed faint blue, folded in triangles, their edges lined with crushed lavender and something citrusy. You take one and drop it into your bowl. The steam changes instantly. It smells like rain before it starts. You close your eyes and inhale. You see hills you've never walked and names you've never heard. You feel fingers brushing your shoulder, as if to say, you are not lost, just elsewhere. And when you open your eyes again, you're still in the smokehouse, still seated beside strangers who feel strangely like family. And your bowl is almost empty. No one claps. No one explains. The woman retrieves her pouch, nods once, and begins packing her things. The others follow, quietly, as though the ritual itself is shy. And to talk now would be a betrayal. You remain for a moment longer, letting the last curls of steam find their place in the air. Then you step outside. and breathe real night air again. The stars above are brighter than before, though. Logically, they are not. Your skin smells like herbs and thyme. You walk back to the farmhouse slowly. No footsteps, no firelight, just the memory of smoke folded into you like a leaf. The sun rises lazily, as if it too had one too many mugs of figged-up tea the night before. You wake to the sound of someone sharpening a sickle against stone, and a rooster crowing like it's auditioning for drama school. Breakfast is humble: flatbread, pickled turnip, and a slightly suspect apricot paste. But the tea, oh, the tea is strange today. You take one sip and freeze. It's red. Not red like wine or cherry. Red like rust. Red like a warning painted in watercolor. The flavor is earthy, sure, but also metallic. Sharp, with a faint sourness that prickles behind your eyes. It doesn't taste bad. Exactly. But it doesn't taste right either. You glance around the courtyard. Others are drinking too. No one is panicking. But there's an unmistakable silence, everyone sipping, glancing into their mugs, then at each other, as if waiting for someone else to say it first. What in the barley biscuit is this? Someone finally mutters. The murmuring begins. A few blame the pot. Others whisper about a cursed ladle. One woman insists Ulfa did it. Because of course she did. But Ulfa is nowhere to be seen suspicious in itself. You wander over to the hearth and lift the lid of the main brewpot. Inside, the tea simmers placidly deep red, almost glowing in the firelight. It smells the same. Lentil, yes, but also something else. Something fungal. That's when Enver arrives, barefoot and already exasperated. This again, he grumbles. Last time, it was red for 3 days. We lost 2 cats and a perfectly good broom. Someone nearby whispers, it's a sign. From what? No one says. Mainstream scholars would probably roll their eyes here. After all, leaf-based infusions change color all the time. Chemical shifts. Acidic water, mineral-heavy pots. Interactions with certain herbs can cause everything from gold to purple. But here's the thing. These people know their tea. They've been steeping lentil leaves for generations. And they know this isn't just a reaction. This is an event. Historians still argue whether the occasional red tea incidents recorded in oral folklore, referred to as the boiling of fire in one village chronicle, were rooted in botany, blight, or ritual mishaps. Some blame mold. Others cite ancient plant diseases. One particularly dramatic theory claims that red tea only appears when the leaves are harvested from the north-facing side of the lentil patch under a waning moon by someone who has lied that week. So, basically, everyone's a suspect. Theories begin flying. A new harvest of leaves from a neighboring ridge. Someone forgetting to soak the bundles. A mix-up with the pomegranate skin stash. Someone even suggests that the ghosts got impatient and stirred the pot themselves. But amid all the chaos, one quiet voice cuts through. A boy, no older than 10, holding his mug in both hands, says, "It tastes like sadness." Everyone turns. He shrugs, but also like when the rain finally comes and no one laughs. Because somehow, he's right. You take another sip. The bitterness is still there, but it carries something else now. Something less herbal and more emotional. This isn't tea for gossip or trade. This is tea that remembers things you haven't told it. The day moves slower. No one talks much. They still drink it. But they drink it like a confession. No clinking, no jokes, just sips and sighs and the occasional You sit near the herb table later, watching as someone tries to recreate the batch with normal ingredients. The same leaves, the same water, same pot. But the tea turns green. As usual, only the big pot the morning's first is red. You return to it. Dip your mug. Still red, still strange, still honest. Someone finally proposes a wild theory. Maybe the leaf remembers something we forgot. You want to scoff, but part of you wonders. Fringe scholars love this idea that certain blends of lentil leaf tea could act like emotional conductors. Not medicinal, not magical, just potent enough, complex enough to mirror what's inside the drinker. Not reveal it, not cure it. Just hold it up for a moment like a mirror in the steam. It wouldn't be the first time a plant surprised us. Later, near dusk, a group of elders gathers near the hearth. One by one, they bring offerings, not bundles this time, but items: a comb, a carved spoon, a cracked mug long since retired. Each is placed beside the fire as the red tea simmers. Someone adds dried fig bark. Someone else stirs it clockwise, very slowly, chanting a half-familiar melody about leaves and blood and rivers that change course in the night. You join them. No one tells you what to do. You just kneel, breathe in the steam, and let the tea be what it is. And when you sip again, yes, it's still red, but now it's also warm, settled, like it was never warning you, just waiting for you to notice. By nightfall, the last of the red tea is poured out, not wasted, but poured deliberately along the roots of the oldest fig tree near the smokehouse. The soil hisses softly as it drinks. The tree creaks. Someone says, "It'll bloom brighter now," and you believe them. Because in this village, tea doesn't just tell stories. Sometimes it tells the truth. You wake to the sound of giggling and fabric snapping in the wind, not the usual adult hum of murmured tea politics or Enver's early morning throat clearing. This is the unfiltered chaos of children, dozens of them, sprinting, tumbling, shouting over one another with the energy of caffeinated squirrels. You step outside just in time to narrowly avoid being trampled by two small boys racing with what appear to be lentil-leaf bundles strapped to their foreheads like ceremonial headbands. Another child is crouched in a corner, very seriously whispering to a teacup. No one stops them. No one even looks surprised. Today is learning day, but not in the way you'd expect. There are no slates, no scrolls, no stern lectures. No one's learning the alphabet or the Pythagorean theorem. Instead, they're learning the old ways, the songs, the folding techniques, the herbal rhymes, and, of course, the art of tea etiquette, which, in this village, is closer to performance art than table manners. At the center of the courtyard, a woman with sunburned cheeks and endless patience gathers the children into a circle. "Show me the triangle fold," she says. 30 grubby hands reach for dried lentil leaves and begin folding. The results are mixed. Some precise, some crumpled. One that looks more like a tortured snail. The woman inspects each with the seriousness of a master chef judging soufflés. "No creases in your grief leaf," she tells one girl gently, smoothing the edge. In ancient Anatolia, this might not seem like standard education, but this was how knowledge traveled, orally, communally, and through the fingers of those too young to know why it mattered. Folding a leaf wasn't just busy work, it was muscle memory for the soul. You watch as one boy folds his leaf 3 times, then tucks it under a rock. "That's for the thunder," he explains. "In case it comes before dinner." You nod, naturally, and then comes the puppet show. Yes, a puppet show, but not the kind with wooden dolls and curtains. These puppets are made of reed skeletons wrapped in rags, their heads carved from dried lentil pods, their eyes painted with soot. They're both terrifying and adorable, like someone let a crow design a cartoon. The children sit cross-legged as 2 elders begin the performance. One puppet is named Lady Leaf, the wise old tea master. The other, a cheeky goat named Sippo, who speaks entirely in exaggerated slurping noises and sarcastic twitches. The story, a dramatic retelling of the time the lentil crop refused to grow because no one remembered to sing to the soil, as Sippo is punished by being made to steep in his own arrogance. Yes, that's a line. The children howl with laughter, but also beneath the silliness you catch the layers. There's meaning in the rhyme. There's memory in the repetition, and beneath the soot-painted humor is a gentle kind of education. When to harvest, how to dry, why bitter tea deserves respect. Historians still argue whether these oral traditions carried practical agricultural knowledge or simply mythic fluff. But honestly, does it matter? If a child remembers not to overboil lentil leaves because Sippo once exploded from steam confusion, then the lesson has landed. Nearby, another group of kids is practicing leaf-folding races. The goal is speed without sacrifice. You have to fold 5 bundles while blindfolded, and you're disqualified if your folds are uneven or if you cry from frustration. A girl named Kira wins 3 rounds in a row. She folds with the calmness of someone who has never once second-guessed herself. "Do you want to try?" someone asks, handing you a limp, dried leaf and a blindfold that smells strongly of goat. You decline. wisely. In one corner of the courtyard, a quieter activity unfolds. A group of older children, probably on the edge of their first ceremonial participation, sits in a semicircle with an elder woman who speaks softly but with precision. She places different tea blends in front of them and asks, "Which one is for grief?" A boy picks the darker brew. "This one." "Why?" "Because it doesn't ask questions." She nods. "And which one is for celebration?" A girl holds up the pale green blend laced with lemon balm. "This one." "It laughs before you do." Again, the elder nods. This is curriculum in its truest form. Sensory, emotional, rooted in experience, and passed along through metaphor, repetition, and lentil leaves. One particularly endearing moment. Two children, tasked with brewing their own new tea, create a disastrous combination of lentil, honey, and crushed onion. They sip it, immediately gag, and declare it very strong against enemies. A new legend is born. Fringe researchers have pointed to activities like these as evidence that children weren't just passive observers in ancient Anatolian life. They were active preservers, the keepers of flavor memory, the inheritors of steam and story. And what better way to ensure continuity than through games no one forgets? As the sun climbs, the children are herded gently and mostly willingly toward the central hearth for a final demonstration. An elder, hands scarred from decades of stone grinding and fire tending, stands over a shallow pot. She drops in folded leaves, one at a time, naming them aloud: sorrow, rain, new moon, first breath. Each bundle makes the water hiss in a slightly different way. The children listen. Some close their eyes. You do, too. When the tea is ready, she pours a little into everyone's mug. The children drink in silence. And you watch them, these tiny stewards of old knowledge, sip with the kind of reverence adults spend decades trying to remember. You sip, too. It tastes like old wood and fresh laughter, like steam that remembers the hand that shaped it. And for a moment, the courtyard feels like a scroll unwritten, unfolding, passed hand to hand in the form of a single warm cup. You find the almanac under a clay bowl of onions. It's not where it's supposed to be, which, according to Olfa, is either the corner niche by the hearth or in the place where no one but me would dare touch it, which could be anywhere. But you stumble across it while searching for a missing spoon and accidentally knocking over a stack of woven reed mats. It's not what you expect. Not a scroll. Not even a book. Really. It's more of a stack parchment pages bound together with thin leather cords and smudged fingerprints. The cover is a strip of wood that's been carved with a single lentil pod and a goat doing something unspeakable to a kettle. You assume this is a joke. You are wrong. This is the Farmer's Almanac, Anatolian edition. But it's not just dates and rainfall, it's a diary. A tea diary. A life told in infusions. You sit cross-legged by the kitchen hearth and open it gently, half expecting the pages to crumble. They don't. They're soft with wear, but sturdy, the kind of parchment that's seen hands, weather, and several unfortunate splashes of plum syrup. The first page is dated in a curious system, third moon, before the white goats returned. A poetic calendar. Naturally, below it, a note in faded ink. Tested Northridge lentil, too green. Tea bitter and chatty. Drank alone? Regret level, mild. You grin. And just like that, you're drawn in, page after page. The anonymous author. Though you're fairly sure it's Enver's grandfather based on the handwriting, and the liberal use of the phrase, "Don't tell Enver" documents their tea experiments with obsessive, endearing detail. Tried mixing sun-dried leaf with thyme bark. Result, calming, but goats stare too long. Possibly cursed. Added one crushed fig stem to threefold leaf. Dreamed of fish arguing. Woke up with plum pit in mouth. Unexplained. Tea for snow day. Double leaf. Nettle. Pinch salt. Warmed fingers. Also revived memory of first kiss. Intrusive. The margins are full of doodles, steam trails, cracked cups, faces with shocked eyebrows. At least 2 pages are dedicated entirely to illustrations of goats reacting to different tea blends. One simply says, "This one did not go well." You flip further and find entries cataloging weather, crop rotations, animal behavior, and tea variations all linked. This isn't just a log of drinks. It's a record of life through the lens of what was sipped. And it's oddly scientific. ratios, boil times, leaf sources, but always with a note about the feeling. Bitter brew today, but skies cleared. Coincidence. Drank red tea again, heart too loud, skipped second cup. There's something comforting about this. A person who didn't separate emotion from agriculture or memory from mug. Who knew that the state of your soul and the taste of your tea were often the same thing? Fringe researchers have debated whether such emotive logs were common or exceptional. Was this a private obsession or a shared tradition? No one knows, but in a world without written recipes, this almanac may have been the only documentation of an entire emotional palette coded into herbs and water and fire. Historians still argue whether ancient Anatolian farmers viewed tea as primarily functional warming, digesting, relaxing, or whether they imbued it with deeper symbolism. But as you turn another page and read, goats restless today, sky low, made fig leaf blend to confuse them. It worked. They forgot how fences worked. You start to suspect they just enjoyed the mystery. One entry stops you, a full page, bordered in charcoal lines. The ink is darker, written with more force. Tea for morning. One dried lentil leaf. No herbs, no salt. Just boil. Breathe. Sip once. Let the cup cool. Do not refill. Let the steam carry what words cannot. No doodles on this one. You sit with that for a moment. Let it steep in your head. Then, at the back of the almanac, you find a list. No dates, just names. You recognize a few. Alpha, Enver, even Sipo the puppet. Next to each name, a blend. Some are practical, some poetic. Alpha mint, anmas, nettle, chaos, Enver, late leaf, barley tip, denial, bone the dog, fennel, bone shard, wind, me, north slope, twofold leaf, red bark, waiting. You close the almanac slowly. Outside, the village is stirring. Someone's whistling a song about bees stealing secrets. A pot clinks on a stove. Children argue about the best way to dry sage without angering the spirits. You tuck the almanac under your arm and step out. You show it to an elder by the fire. She laughs loud, joyful, familiar. Oh, that thing. I thought we lost it, or burned it, or maybe gave it to the chicken by mistake. She flips through it, nodding fondly. That page about the goats. Completely true. You hand it back. She shakes her head. No, you found it. It's yours now. Keep adding, but no skipping. If you drink it, you write it. That night, by firelight, you take your first page. Your handwriting is clumsy. The ink blotches, but it's yours. Mid-season leaf, boiled with river mint. Drank alone, remembered nothing. Slept well, regret level, none. You close the almanac and smile. Because sometimes history isn't in the grand gestures. Sometimes it's just tea and memory, ink and warmth, and whether or not the goats acted weird. The wind is different today, drier, a bit sharper, with the scent of dust riding its edge like a warning, whispered too casually. There's no storm coming. Not exactly, but something is shifting, and everyone knows it. You walk the perimeter of the farmhouse, passing by doorways where bundles of herbs hang slightly lower than usual. You catch a woman repainting the sun symbol over her lintel. A child gathers firewood but pauses longer than necessary near the lentil patch, as if waiting for it to speak. No one says it out loud, but it's clear. Things are thinning. Not the people there here. Still laughing. Still arguing about goats and tea, but the circle feels smaller now. Tighter. Like fewer leaves are being folded. Like fewer cups are being passed. And as you sit by the hearth, watching the steam curl from your mug, it hits you. The decline has already begun. It didn't announce itself with a scream. It whispered. One missing leaf bundle. One abandoned ritual. One family moving closer to the city for better trade. Little by little, the tea gets lonelier. That's not to say it's gone. Not yet. Alpha still burns her weekly blend with the confidence of a woman who thinks she can outstare death. And Ver still grumbles about kids these days not knowing the proper folding angle. And yes, Bone the dog still circles the courtyard like a sleepy little oracle. But you can feel the edges of tradition fraying. One morning, you pass the herb table and find fewer bundles drying. Someone mutters about mold. Another says, the younger folk don't want to pick leaves anymore, too itchy. Too boring. Not flavorful enough for city tongues. Later, you overhear two teens joking about replacing lentil tea with real tea from market traders. Stuff that tastes like cinnamon and ambition. One says, laughing. The other snorts and adds, at least it doesn't smell like wet barn. You don't blame them. Not really. The world moves. Cities grow. Markets change. Tea becomes shiny and packaged, and labeled with words like refreshing or detox instead of morning and memory. And yet, that evening, a small group still gathers by the hearth. You're among them, sitting in the same woven mat circle, the same slow silence threading between sips. The tea is darker tonight, rich, earthy, slightly bitter. No one tries to brighten it. It's not that kind of night. A man clears his throat. Do you remember when we tried to teach the chickens the song of the summer rain? Laughter, slow and fond. A woman adds, do you remember when the tea turned red and the fig tree bloomed early anyway? Nods all around. Then silence. No one speaks the next memory, but you feel it pass through the group like heat from the hearth. The first time someone forgot the folding rhyme, the day the puppet show stopped. You take a long sip. The tea tastes like dried bark and distant thunder, like something holding on. Fringe researchers often romanticize this decline, painting it as a tragic loss of pre-modern innocence. They imagine the last tea bundle burned in some symbolic ceremony, villagers weeping while trucks roll in with factory-made tins. But it's not like that. It's slower, more stubborn. Tradition doesn't vanish. It lingers. It hides in the corners of the houses, in the stubborn habit of folding a leaf without thinking, in the way someone still murmurs to their cup before the first sip, even if they no longer know why. Historians still argue whether this decline was caused by economics, climate, or cultural erosion. But here, sitting in this courtyard with smoke in your hair and warmth in your gut, you realize that the why doesn't matter as much as the how. And the how, days. A house is quietly. You wander later through the storage room and find a forgotten jar of dried lentil leaves. Dust-covered, yes, but intact. You open it. The scent is faint like memory left out in the sun too long, but it's there. You fold one into a triangle. You place it in your pocket, because that's how things survive. Not through grand gestures, but through habits, through pockets, through the quiet decision to fold one more leaf. You notice others doing the same. Folding, brewing, writing down blends on scraps of parchment and tucking them into clay jars, not to save the past but to carry it forward. Not for nostalgia, but for continuity. And maybe someday, someone will find one of those jars, open it, smell the ghost of Lentil-Leaf, brew a mug without knowing what it means and somehow feel deep down that it still matters. Maybe, for now, the night deepens, the fire burns lower, and the village holds on not fiercely, not desperately, but patiently, and the tea, still bitter, still beautiful, still here. It's nearly dusk again. You're standing just beyond the farmhouse, at the edge of the lentil fields, where the soil turns softer and the wind knows your name. The last light stretches long across the hills, drawing golden lines between shadow and memory. Behind you, the voices have grown quieter. Fewer pots boil, fewer bundles hang from doorways. The courtyard is mostly empty now, save for one bent figure kneeling beside the old hearth. She hasn't noticed you, or maybe she has and just doesn't care. It's Olfa. Of course it's Olfa. She's slowly folding a single lentil leaf, fingers trembling slightly. The hearth beside her is barely more than embers now, and the pot resting on it is small, just enough for one cup. You walk over and sit nearby without speaking. She doesn't look up. Last one, she mutters. You're not sure if she means the leaf, the tea, or the day. She adds a pinch of something from her pocket. You recognize it. Crushed fig bark, a bit of lavender, and that strange ghost-smelling herb she never named. The water hisses. The steam rises. No ceremony. No audience. Just her. And you. She pours the tea into a cracked cup with a handle that's held on by stubbornness and string. Then, finally, she speaks. We only brew what we can carry. You nod. Doesn't mean we carry it all forward, she adds. She sips. Doesn't offer you any. That's fair. You both watch the steam. This place, this farmhouse, this field, this fading echo of ritual and warmth was never meant to be preserved in amber. It was meant to breathe, to evolve, to fold and unfold with the seasons. You look around, the fields are still here, the stone walls, the smokehouse, even the silly puppet heads, now tucked into a basket under a dusty cloth. Maybe not everyone will remember the folding rhyme. Maybe they'll forget which blend is for grief and which is for dreaming. Maybe someday, someone will drink lentil-leaf tea from a polished glass and never know it was once stirred with fingers, songs, and a healthy fear of goats. But that's okay, because tonight, right now you're here. And you remember, you leave Olfa to her cup and walk back toward the main house. The last of the coals glow behind you, a soft heartbeat against the dark. Inside, someone has lit a single oil lamp. You sit near it, open the almanac once more, and write, last leaf. Quiet tea, steam like old breath, remembered everything, said nothing, slept well. You close the book, fold one final leaf, and place it near the fire. Not for luck, not for spirits, just for the rhythm of it. Just to say, we were here. And just as the fire sighs low and the wind begins to settle against the walls, your eyes close, the tea is finished, the story folded, and the steam has carried what words could not. Now, as the embers cool and the night deepens, you let yourself drift. There's no more movement now, no stirring, no whispering, no bundles being folded, just the slow hush of ancient breath, the weight of soil long warmed by firelight, and the memory of butter leaves steeped in quiet. Your body, heavy with rest, begins to loosen around the edges. Your limbs settle into stillness, like bundles laid to dry on sun-warmed stone. There's no urgency here, nothing left undone, nothing pressing against the edges of the moment. The courtyard is empty, the wind has stilled, the moon rises soft and wide above the fields, casting silver over the clay walls and the old hearths. You picture it, the last cup, still warm, still waiting. You don't need to drink it, you already know how it tastes. Time thins, thoughts fade, and the night wraps around you like old wool frayed at the edges, but still warm, still trusted. Let it hold you, let it steep. You've walked the hills, folded the leaves, listened to the stories inside the steam. Now all that's left is quiet, a still cup, a deep breath, a sleep without weight. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are simply resting in the last steam on the stone floor. Good night, now, and sweet dreams.